Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a deep, documentary-style dive into a very specific grassroots political movement. We're going to objectively examine the philosophy, the history, and the organization of the State Assembly movement, and we're pulling this directly from their own published source materials. So, let's just jump right in and see exactly what these documents have to say.
Here's a quick roadmap of what we're going to cover today. We'll start with their core philosophy, then look at their historical claims, why these assemblies were formed, how they actually organize themselves, what grassroots participation looks like on the ground, and finally, our key takeaways.
All right, Section 1, Introduction. Let's start right at the fundamental philosophical tension that sits at the very heart of the State Assembly materials.
Right off the bat, these source documents present the reader with a profoundly heavy question. Are you actually participating in government, or are you just being governed? The texts argue that most people today are basically just standing around letting other people govern them, living in a state of passive dependence rather than practicing active self-governance.
Look at how sharply the texts distinguish between these two states of being. On one side, being governed is described almost like an addiction to dependency. The documents use pretty intense terms like indentured servitude, acting as a ward of the state, or relying on a nanny state that micromanages your everyday life. But on the flip side, self-governance is all about independence, taking on active community responsibility and honoring your word. According to the texts, choosing self-governance means completely rejecting the comfort of having someone else tell you what to do.
Okay, moving on to Section 2, Historical Background. Let's look at the specific historical narrative these assembly materials use to justify rebuilding this system today.
So, according to their materials, the timeline starts back in 1776 with the unanimous Declaration of Independence, which they say established a lawful government on the land and soil. But then the texts claim a massive shift happened in the 1860s. They assert that the American Civil War basically resulted in a perpetual military occupation and a total takeover of the original government structure. And this, according to the materials, led to a roughly 150-year period of dormancy. Essentially, the actual lawful American government was put on ice. Today, the movement states they are quite literally rebuilding that original system from scratch.
To wrap your head around their view of the modern political landscape, you really have to look at the territorial and municipal systems. The Assembly texts view the current governmental entities, the ones we typically interact with in Washington, D.C., not as the true sovereign government. Instead, they classify them as subcontractors. The documents allege that these subcontractors are operating way outside their original constitutional boundaries and are actually bankrupt corporations holding the American people's assets as collateral.
Which brings us to Section 3, Why Assemblies Were Formed. Let's talk about the practical void these grassroots assemblies believe they're filling right now.
The movement's big overarching goal, as described in their literature, is to end what they call 150 years of criminal misadministration. And how do they want to do that? By converting the government back to its original function across all 50 states. They define that original function super simply, protecting the people and their property. By literally gathering together on the land, they believe they're providing the living, breathing proof that the country is not abandoned property.
Now, the texts are very explicit about defining what they are and, maybe more importantly, what they are not. They state clearly that a state assembly is a peaceful gathering of men and women working together to rebuild lawful government. It's inclusive, it's committee-based, and it's heavily focused on community building. Crucially, and they repeat this a lot, the materials explicitly reject violence. They state that the assembly is absolutely not a suicidal armed insurrection, it's not a foreign corporation, and it's certainly not a secret society. The whole focus is on peace, lawful action, and complete public transparency.
All right, on to Section 4, How Assemblies Are Organized. Let's peek under the hood at the structural architecture proposed to actually accomplish these massive goals.
The text outline an architecture based on what they call the 4 pillars. Basically, for a state assembly to be fully seated and operational, all 4 of these have to be functioning. First, you've got the General Assembly, which handles interstate business, local issues, and elections. Second is the International Business Assembly for interstate and global matters. Third is the militia. Now, the text defined the militia primarily around peacekeeping, safety, and community services. And finally, the 4th pillar is the Jural Assembly, which handles the courts.
I really want to highlight this 4th pillar, the Jural Assembly. The source documents put a massive amount of importance on this function. Its purpose is to staff local courts, fill jury pools, and elect officials like sheriffs and coroners. The ultimate goal here is to enforce what they call American common law. The texts argue that once these local American common law courts are up and running, Other jurisdictions will be legally mandated to withdraw, restoring justice on a local level.
Moving into Section 5, what participation looks like. We've seen the high-level structure, but what does this mean for a regular person on the ground? The materials strongly stress that you can't just casually show up to a meeting. There's a required administrative process. Because they believe Americans have been falsely registered as territorial subjects or corporate franchises, individuals have to perform this extra step. You must formally declare, record, and publish your birthright political status as an American. Doing this, they argue, acts like finding your exact piece of the puzzle. It gives you and your assembly the actual lawful standing and authority to act.
To understand the philosophy behind this, the source text uses this fantastic metaphor. Imagine you have a written contract giving you the right to pick blueberries on your neighbor's farm. Well, that right is entirely useless if you don't actually find a pail, hike up the hill, bend down, and pick the berries. You have the right, sure, but to get any benefit out of it, you physically have to exert yourself.
As the text boldly states, having a right to do something does not equal doing it. You can argue about where the best blueberry patch is for the rest of your life, but unless you climb the hill, it's purely academic. And the materials apply this exact logic directly to government. You have the right to organize and operate your government, but if you don't do the work, if you don't declare your status, attend the meetings, and serve on the juries, your rights are essentially moot. Self-governance demands active duty and rigorous community responsibility.
Finally, Section 6, Key Takeaways. Let's bring this all together and summarize the core concepts we've explored in this explainer. So distilling everything we've looked at today from these source materials, we really see four main themes. First, an absolute rejection of passive dependency and the nanny state. Second, a very specific historical claim that the original American government has been dormant for 150 years due to corporate and military overreach. Third, a structured four-pillar approach to rebuilding that government from the county level up. And finally, the philosophical bedrock of the whole shebang, the absolute necessity of active, continuous self-governance.
Which leaves us with a pretty compelling final thought, drawn straight from the ethos of the documents we just reviewed. If self-governance is truly a muscle that must be exercised to avoid atrophy, the question becomes, are you ready to hike up that hill and learn more about your local assembly? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.